Welcome to the Drawing Solo podcast. My name is Mason McKinney, and I'm with.
Matt Fennell.
And if you want to find out how to get inspiration from anywhere, make sure to sign up to my newsletter and get a free ebook that'll show you how to do so. My gift to you. So Matt, tell me what do you create?
I create a lot of stuff. I write comics. I like writing scripts. I like writing sketches. I pretty much do anything I want to do at the moment.
What made you want to get into that?
Um, well, when I was younger, I was kind of like a liar. I just used to tell stories all the time, and it just kind of, I just kind of naturally fell into it, you know. Um, I just start writing. I'd have to write stories for like school or whatever, and I really had fun doing that. And as time went on, I just started trying to put production value behind it, and I started animating for a little bit, and then I stopped and kind of became a full time writer now. Right now, I'm just working on comics with an unknown author who happens to run a podcast that we're on right now, and yeah.
You said something about kind of writing as a way of lying. Can you elaborate with that on that real quick?
Yeah, I feel like lies, especially when you're like younger, that when you're younger, like lies are a lot less evil and they just come from a large imagination, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
your imagination is the forefront of storytelling, to me at least, you know? And I used to tell a lot of stories when I was younger. I used to just come in and I'd be like, "Hey, guess what? This, that, and the third, or whatever," and annoying any adults that were in my vicinity, you know. And so I kind of use that skill, quote unquote, to make it something productive instead of just fucking shit all the time, you know.
Like turn something very juvenile into something productive. Well, something that
Essentially,
we used to see as
yeah,
juvenile. Well, it depends on the context of like what you put it in. A fire
yeah,
can either burn a house or cook a steak. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah. Or a fire can get revenge on somebody you want to get revenge on.
Or
They call that arson, but
oh yeah, or arson, or blow up a car. I don't know.
what
Uh,
else? Yeah. All right, Diddy.
oh my goodness, I couldn't help myself. All right, so can you explain the works that you want to talk about in seven words each?
Yes, I'll explain one that I'm most proud of. It is a comic I'm working on called Just Reaper. Um, the log line is, or the 7 words is, a young Grim Reaper keeps hell off Earth. That's 8 words, but I feel like you kind of get my point here. Um, well, I guess I can take the A out and say young Grim Reaper keeps hell off Earth.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. I don't know if you want me to explain it further.
yeah. You go ahead. Please explain.
All right, yeah, sure. Just Reaper is a collaboration between me and you. Um, I am very proud of it. I came up with the idea when I was 15. Um, back in back when I was 15. I'm 22 now, for reference. I used to do this art class, after school art class at my local community center, and I couldn't draw very well, and I used to go with my brother who could draw. So sometimes I'd tag along with him, and instead of drawing, I'd pitch my art teacher TV shows or short films or like movies or anything that was on my mind. I was just really interested in storytelling at the time, and I wanted to put my hand in every single pie, kind of thing. Um, and one of the stories was what Just Reaper is now. I think the original format was a short film, and it was going to be about a young Grim Reaper uh, capturing a demon in a frat house. Now I don't remember the full story with that, but I just remember that being kind of like the idea there because I thought it was funny at the time. I don't know why, but I just did. And my art teacher and my classmate kind of gave me props or whatever, and it made me really want to work on it. But as all 15-year-olds do, I procrastinated with it a lot, and so it became a lot of different things until I came to you, and we kind of made it what it is now, and I'm very, very proud of it.
What would you say? What was the biggest inspiration from like that spark that like cultivated the early version of Just a Reaper?
Well, actually, um, what made me realize that this idea had to, like, like I had to make the idea at some point was actually when I was 16 or 17. I had to be 17. I had seen Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and at the time I was really skeptical about how they would treat a black Spider-Man because I feel like a lot of Hollywood people don't really know how to treat black characters if the writers aren't black.
Mm-hmm.
So I was very, very like nervous on how they would treat that character. So I went and saw it, and it was good. And I felt like they kind of made him his own dude, and they didn't go for things that maybe a hack would have with that character. And after seeing that, that made me go, I'm like, okay, well, maybe my guy can uh, be kind of like that. Maybe I can make something that people will accept, like Miles Morales. You know, it wasn't like it didn't necessarily inspire anything in the crux of the story, but in terms of me actually putting, yeah, hitting the gas with the project, I think that is the one moment I can say that really made me go, all right, let me put the gas to this and make this happen.
Mm. Okay, that's nice. I like that. I like that. So, what do you want to see more of in your creative field?
That's a very good question. Uh, I think, hmm, I think in my creative field, I'm a writer, right? So whenever I watch content, I'm kind of thinking from a different perspective than maybe the average viewer will. Not to sound pretentious, but like, you know, if I'm watching a TV show, I'm kind of a little bit more hyper aware of certain things, of like, what's the word, like tropes or like, specific ways people treat characters or whatever. And I feel like I would like to see a lot more. I'd like to see a lot more new things. And now that sounds a little bit vague, so I'll kind of break that down a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
I think I I think Hollywood or the entertainment industry in general has hit a brick wall in the sense of like being out, going out of the box is kind of taboo now because when you go out of the box, you are more liable to alienate people. I wouldn't even say offend. I'll say alienate.
What
You're more likely to alienate people.
what would you qualify as going out of the box?
Well, I'd consider going out of the box. Hmm, that's a good question. I gotta think. Hmm. I think.
Because I remember I was watching a video, and the video made a point of how we don't make a lot of comedy movies, like big budget or medium budget comedies
Yes.
anymore. And a lot like people would point the finger as the culture is too tender. There's a lot of people are hyper aware of global atrocities at the time, so we can't make fun of what like people would probably find less fortunate, or people that are
Yeah,
different. Is that what you are
I
probably getting at, or would you agree to that?
a little bit. I agree with that. Usually, the quick tangent. Like usually when people talk about comedy nowadays, cancellation is part of it. But comedy has always been like that. There's never
Hmm.
not been a time where you couldn't get quote unquote canceled for making a joke. And it's kind of a hot take, but like I think you do need both sides of that. You do need the badasses who will be like, "Oh man, like I'll drop the N bomb on stage or whatever," and then you need the people who will be like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, reel that back, bro. You can't like you're white. Don't do that." You know
Hmm.
what I mean? Like you do need both sides to make this comedy thing work because you need the lines to cross over. You know what I mean? It's funny. Like people can be straight up funny, and I think you can be funny without having to make fun of people or whatever. But there is comedy and being shocking,
So
you know,
so comedy needs both sides of
to
the
work
spectrum
for
to work.
sure.
Like the people
I
who
Yes,
need to be tender, and the other side that needs to find out what is pushing people's buttons.
yes, I do
Where's the
think
comedy at?
yes, I do think that the sensitive cancel culture folks that like people want to get rid of so badly are needed, and I do think the edgy Nazi white supremacists or anti-Semitic, whatever you want to call these comedians nowadays, you need those guys too or
Like,
whatever because you can't be too sensitive, or else you're not going to do anything, and you can't be too badass or we have no order. You know?
would you say the middle ground, the of the sensitive, the tough, the middle ground between the tough and the tender, is a good barometer of where a certain culture, I wouldn't say like a nation, because I feel like since we are living in America and times are pretty crazy at the moment,
No,
would you
everything's
say
going
like,
right. Everything's going okay.
yeah, everything's okay in America? Nothing bad happens in America ever.
Nothing has ever happened bad in America in a billion years.
Never.
Never.
Oh man. So would you say that the the space between the tough and the tender would be a good barometer or an overhead view of where the public sentiment lies?
So to say that question back to you, are you
Yeah.
essentially asking me, is the middle ground where is that how the public feels? Is the
Yes.
public
Yeah.
in the middle ground?
Yeah. I apologize.
Eh,
I'm asking as my brain develops its
Question. Yeah,
yeah
no,
its
I get it. I
question.
get. Listen, it's your show, buddy.
All
I
this
have
is
to
off the
understand
cuff.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, but well, I think yes, I do think that your average Americans are in the middle for a lot of things. Um, Now the loud minority is a phrase that is over said a lot. Like people say that a lot, the loud minority,
Hmm.
without not really knowing what that means. I do think that there are more than a minority of people who feel certain ways about things nowadays. However, though, I do think there's enough of the general public who are who are willing to hear you out or willing to stay in the middle on certain topics. And I feel like that that may not be the majority like it used to be. I do believe that back in the day it was more majority to be in the middle on things. You know what I mean? You
Hmm.
don't want to. I think my manager when I worked at a car dealership. He told me something. He was like the 70-year-old white dude, right? And so like sometimes I just ask him questions or whatever, and he'd tell me about stuff. And I asked him like, "Who'd you vote for?" or whatever, and he wouldn't tell me. And then he said like, "Listen, Matt, like the two things you don't talk about are religion and politics."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Oh," I'm like, "That's interesting because that's not how everybody else feels." You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
I do believe that there was a time period where if you did bring up one or two of those things, you know what I mean, you were being socially awkward. Like you were deliberately trying to start stuff, and people knew that. You know. Nowadays, though, you do have to have an opinion on a lot of things, and a lot of people won't let you not take a side. Even the government is very black and white on things where they'll be like, okay, you have to feel a certain way on this or not, or you're on the other side. Either you're on the right side of history or you're on the wrong side of history. You know what I mean? That's where the American government gets most of the bread and butter, is making things black and white. You know what I mean? And I do think that nowadays you do have to be on one side or another side. But there is a healthy middle that is willing to hear you out. I think what I'm trying to say with my rambling is that people are not as cut and dry, black and white as, you know, one side wants to tell you or the other side wants to tell you. I do believe there's people who are out there who still do want to play neutral, you know, play Sweden or Switzerland, I mean, and try to figure out what side is better, which side is worse, or both sides are worse, or we need a new system. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I do think that people are willing to hear things out, and I think people are willing to negotiate more than, you know, certain sides want to lead you on to believe.
I have like two questions.
Yeah.
I need to stop saying like so much. But would you long for the days of people not talking about religion or politics? What do you feel about that sentiment or that statement that you do not talk about religion or politics flat out?
Well, when my boss told me that, I laughed. I thought it was really funny because of how times have really shifted.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, like it, and he was older too, so it was just funny. An older guy was telling me about like nowadays or whatever, like you kids or whatever. It's just get off my lawn stuff, you know. So like that's always funny to me, listening to old people rant about stuff, listening to old heads rant about stuff. I don't think I do, because I do think there's something to all of this anger
Mm-hmm.
and emotions. Like this didn't come out of nowhere, and there might be a missing link in American culture that nobody has been willing to look at.
So you think this is
that
like
caused all of this? You know what I mean?
Okay, so you think it's probably like a pendulum swinging of after generations of like, we don't talk about this, to, oh wait, now we need to talk about this.
Kinda, yes. I do believe that this didn't come out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. I don't think people came out of nowhere talking about, you know what I mean, sex politics or, you know, like abortion rights or like, you know, racism, you know, sexism, whatever the case may be. I don't think that just fell out of the fucking window. You know what I mean? And people do want to act like that's how it is. You know what I mean? People want to be like, oh man, this just happened. It started happening. And it's like, no, there's a build up to this. Now, again, like, can I pinpoint when that was? No, I don't think I can pinpoint when that was. But I do think there's something has to shake from this hell that we're in right now, this hell world we're in right now. Something will come out of this, good or bad. And because of that, I don't actually long for the past, because the past is the past. Mm-hmm. I don't think we can go back to that, because in this hell, like, we're going to have to figure something out. we're gonna have to figure out answers to all these questions we have. Maybe we did open Pandora's box or whatever, but we're gonna have to close it at some point because we have to get to a certain you have to get to a certain answer.
Mm-hmm.
There's no way we're not gonna get to an answer
Do you think we
to
need to?
all these.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Do you think we need to learn certain things from the past to get to that answer? And if we do, what are some of the lessons that we can learn from the past to get closer to that answer?
Um, I do think so. I do think you have to look in history is the cheat code for the future. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel that.
Um, I, I can't pinpoint one thing specifically, but I do feel like, and specifically American culture, the way civil rights was handled was was the starting point of a lot of things that people disagree with now in terms of how we treat minorities in this country. I do believe that the way civil rights was handled very was more sinister than people like to believe.
Mm-hmm.
I think that a lot of black folks who went out of their ways kind of to die for the mission. They didn't die for no reason, but there was a lot of I'm trying not to get assassinated here.
I understand.
I
If you
I
want
think
to
there was a
move
lot.
on to a different topic, we can.
No. I like playing with my life like this.
Okay.
Um, I think that there was a lot of things that went on during that time period that really put the black community in a box that the government now, or not only the government, but American culture now still has us in.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I do think it did start with black folks in America. That's just me. Because I think the way they handled that situation through going from slavery to Jim Crow to the civil rights movement, I do think there is something in that people don't talk about because it's uncomfortable. You know what I mean? If you ask a white person about slavery, they're like, "Oh, well, you guys are out now." Huh. Well, just you know what I mean? Like, "Oh, well, my grandfather was a slave owner. I wasn't a slave owner." You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And like the fact that like that part of history is so like people don't even want to talk about it, or people have such a limited knowledge on that part of history that like I do believe there is something in that, and if we look into that and make an effort of like putting that information out here, like, okay, how did they get from slavery? How did they get to slavery from Jim Crow? You want to talk about the Emancipation Proclamation and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
but there was the whole period between Jim Crow and the Emancipation Proclamation. There was a whole period between that of history that nobody talks about. You know what I mean? There's stories of, or the main thing I used to hear because my dad was really into history was there's black presidents. There's black
Mm-hmm.
presidents. There was like black governments. There was Black Wall Street. That's a story that people don't really talk about a lot. There was a lot of different stuff going on that is never looked at. Now I'm talking about black people because I'm black, so like that's what I know of. But there was Spanish people that lived here. There was Asian people that lived here. There was Native American people that lived here, and a lot of that history is not talked about. And there are large gaps in between the history books. You know what I mean? If you go to you go to school or whatever, it's like all right, it's fifth grade. What do they used to call it? social studies. Fifth grade social studies. All right. Well, you guys remember World War One? Remember World War Two? Remember the Holocaust? Oh yeah. Remember Cold War? All right.
Hmm.
Now 9/11, and now we have a black president, and that's it. You know what I mean? It's like it's not really that deep. So I do think that if we stop being sensitive about our own history, I do think that there are ways that we can nip a lot of things right now in the bud. Even if it is correcting past wrongs, you know what I mean? Even if it is, we have to go back and or we have to take care of things that have carried over from Jim Crow or you know early late '80s stuff. If we have to nip that in the bud now, that's what we have to do. You know what I mean?
Who do we? I have a question.
Mhm.
Everything I have is questions, but I have nothing but questions. But who do we trust with history? Since now in today's time, everything is just being politicized when it comes to the sciences, like I said, history, what's good and what's not good for the country, our bodies, spiritually. Like, who do we, but within this certain confines of history, since that's what we're talking about now, is there a certain institution or can there be an institution that the people can trust in? Because everybody has their own time. Everybody has a certain amount of time. They have a certain amount of care to put into certain things in the world. I guess I'll leave it at that. If you need me to elaborate, I can, but I feel like I've
Let me think.
spoken enough.
I think yeah. So essentially, you're asking. This is me trying to piece together in my head. Essentially, you're asking: is there someone we can go to make sure we're getting all the history
Hmm.
of the world? I
Or at least like
or at
of the
least
world seems like a little bit too broad, but maybe just
okay, but like history in
like let's
kind of
like specifically like Black history or American history.
American history.
Yes.
Yeah. Um. Well, I'll say I'll go to hell before I trust a politician. So there is this level of like I want to say no
Hmm.
immediately because I don't think the American government is capable of doing that. If there was a government to do that, it would probably be the American government,
The
not
Ministry of
for any like
yeah, the
say
Ministry of Truth, maybe. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, or yeah, the Supreme Court of Truth or whatever,
Hmm.
whatever it is. Like, I think, if there was a government to release that, it probably would be the American government, not for any like nationalism, like oh we're the best kind of thing. It's more so like we've somehow managed to turn our dirty laundry into money,
Hmm.
and a lot of countries don't do that. If you notice, you know what I mean. Like you never hear China talk about Tiananmen Square, you know?
Right. Right.
So I do think that if there was a country to put that in place, it would be the American government. But I do think we'd find a way to corrupt it too. So in a
Yeah.
way, what I am asking for is sort of a moot point anyway, because I don't think there is a way to make it happen. However, though, I do think that if I'll say black people, if we kind of just did our own research in that sense or whatever. Now there's a lot of there's a black people lie too, so there's a lot of shit in
Mhm.
certain thing on certain areas where you'll see stuff that maybe isn't completely true
Yeah.
or not or is biased
Hmm.
or whatever. Um at the same time though, I do think that like if black people kind of made that a priority, I do think we can learn a lot from that. You
Hmm.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
Again, there was a Black Wall Street, and it was burnt down to the ground, and you don't see that in history.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
so it's like I don't think that we're it's impossible. Obviously, what we'd have to do nowadays is we just have to be more careful about what sources we trust, even
Hmm.
if it's from our own community. You know?
Yeah. As that one saying goes, men lie, women lie. The only thing that doesn't lie are numbers, but people lie about that. So
Yeah,
it's unfortunate. But
I can
you,
name
go ahead.
about several analytics that lie. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like you touched upon the how the government would just like lie to its people, such as like Tiananmen Square, like like several American operations. I'm sure of.
Yeah,
Just
yeah. Not to name any names.
no, yeah, trying to live to see another day. You know.
I do not want to get a message from AOC. That's my main goal with this podcast. Is I don't want any. I don't want to be on the Clinton list. I do not want to have to. I don't want to have to be looking out my window here. I just want to have a fun podcast with my bro. That's all I want.
Yeah. Do you? What do you think is the use of government if they do so many things that's very you would see as immoral? What do
Um,
you make of that?
huh.
Well, do you see it as immoral or amoral or a necessary evil? Or maybe a good thing?
Mm, I do think there is a necessary evil in the government.
Mhm.
Um, I think that I think you just the way that the founding fathers and I have like next to nothing to relate to them about or whatever, but I do think that history is interesting.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? About how these Englishmen just started up a government or whatever. I do think that the way it was started up was not built for certain people. Mostly like, people who weren't a specific race or whatever. I mean, like, yeah, they adjusted for it as time went on, but that's not what it was like built for in the first place. So there's just a lot of things in there that that kind of how do I put this? It's the way the government was started was not built for how many different issues we have now. And the issues, like if there was a issue box or whatever, it's now a whole. It's as big as the Empire State Building. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because now you have all different types of cultures, and every single culture has to be met. Their needs have to be met if they want to live here, and that's how it should be. You know,
Mhm.
but that's not how the government is built. So yeah, it's a necessary evil, but you would need to change the system if you wanted to appease multiple different cultures. You know what I mean? It was
Mhm.
different when it was just the English Anglo-Saxon folks, the wasps, just standing around, chopping trees down and like eating like goat milk and cheese or whatever the history books were talking about.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We have different people, we have different folks, and all their needs have to be met. There's no choice in that. And I think the government realized that I in the 1900s, and that's why there's a lot of um, government programs we could talk about because I want to live another day.
Mhm.
But um, yeah, I think the government does know that, and I think the government is corrupt for a reason, not a good one, but it is for that reason of everybody's needs have to be met. How do we manipulate that into making sure a select group of people are able to make it through every day and kind of pit everybody else against each other, kind of thing.
Is
So in a way, it's necessary because you do need a government to appease everybody's needs,
Mm-hmm.
but it's evil in that they pit everybody against each other and pick the ones that they want to survive the next day.
Do you believe that, and with that pinning of each other, do you think that they have a certain group of people that they want to pin against each other, or do they want, like, do they have a preferred class of people that they want?
Hmm. I do think white people might be the preferred class. Yes, I think it might be white people.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why I'm kind of like iffy on that is because they can change that if they wanted to,
Right.
and I'm not in the government, so I don't know if they will switch from white people to, you know, to black people or to Hispanic people or to Asian people. I truly don't know. But from what I've seen and from the government programs, I'm not going to talk about because I love Hillary Clinton.
Mm-hmm.
Is it does seem to be they geared more towards white people.
Do
They
you
do prefer white people more.
Would you say they're looking for ethnicity or behaviors? Because since this is the conversational part of the podcast, I would think that they are more looking for people who are subservient to whatever needs that they are looking for. Whether you're black or white, I feel that race doesn't matter to them. What matters is, are you going to do what we say without question? And will you pin yourself against people who are willing to fight against us, fight against the government, your government? And
Well,
if it,
I believe. I'm sorry to cut you. I
oh
don't know
yeah,
if you
I feel like it
finish this thought.
happens to be white. We happen to see more white people doing that because, like, the U.S. is like 75, 60% white people, like overwhelmingly majority white people. So within that majority of white people, you have half being people who are for the government, and then the other half being against the government. And even though you have half of a 65 to 7, like 60 to 75% of the population, that's still a lot of people. So I think that a race is kind of looking too far back. What would you say about that?
I think I see what you're saying. I do agree to a certain extent. I do think that they definitely make sure that they can make it as simple as what race of people. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Because like the stereotype is like the white guy is like, oh man, I just want to do my taxes and like I just want a wife and I want a white fence or whatever.
They
I just
see,
want to grow all
yeah,
day.
they see
You know,
like crime on the other side of the street, and they say, "Man, why can't they just stay home and pay their taxes?" Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. So like all white people think that all to life is tax and stuff, and then you have black people and the main stereotype, and it's not true, but
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh man, I'm a gangbanger or whatever the thing is or whatever. I don't even like giving it any air because it's like stupid. Um, and like I think even though there's black people who do live that type of life, I don't think it's that cut and dry. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I do think the government makes sure that those stereotypes stay with those races. You know what I mean? Like I think the government in order to make sure they don't have to look at behavior, they try to make sure that black people stay in this certain box and white people stay in this certain box. You know what I mean? They want all white people to sit around talk about taxes and on their front lawns, and they want black people listening to hip hop and shooting guns or whatever. You know what I mean? They want to make sure those stereotypes are on both of those races, so that when it comes down to it, and they comes down to, all right, well, like, how are we gonna roll out this law? It's like, all right, well, who's the most subservient? Oh, we didn't have to check. It's always gonna be whites, so we don't have to put blacks in we don't have to support them. You know what I mean?
Okay, I feel that. Like I've been writing a little bit of bullet points as you were talking because I want to get back, call them like a little bit of bookmarks. Since we're talking about demographics again, this goes back to the conversation of comedy, and you mentioned something about the loud minority, and I wanted to ask: what do you feel about the loud minority? Are there any merit to any contrarian position, no matter how small or, in this case, how loud they are?
That's a good question, because I believe I consider myself a comedy purist, in the sense of, like, I feel like if you go on stage, or you go behind a camera, or you go behind your typewriter, or what is fucking typewriter, fucking your computer,
Keeping it old
or whatever.
school.
Yeah. Unless you're like in the 1960s and you're smoking cigars and stuff, or whatever. Your typewriter, or whatever the fuck you're writing behind or speaking behind. I do believe that if you are joking, you do get not a pass, but you should be able to express your joke, even if it's quote unquote not funny. That's just me. I think that if you get a joke off, if it's not funny, that's the rule. Is that, oh, it's not funny, that's why there's no merit to it. And if it's funny, then we can discuss it a little bit more. I feel like with the loud minority, I do think they always have merit, and I'll tell you why. Because the loud minority, they are in the audience. They are in the audience of whoever is speaking or whoever's typing, whatever the case may be. If you're doing comedy and someone's in the audience and one of them is being really, like, sensitive, or being like, oh man, why would you even say that? Oh, how could you say that? Or whatever the case may be, I do think that person has merit, because that's the audience. That's who's telling you what is funny or not. Now, I also believe that majority rules in comedy too. So because you're a loud minority, that doesn't mean that, like, you know what I mean? Just because you say that doesn't mean that guy has to stop doing comedy if everybody's laughing. You know what I mean?
Right. So
like, if everyone's enjoying a movie and then you're like, oh man, that movie sucked or whatever. It's like, what was the point of that?
Yes. And I suppose, like, with the loud minority, I see that as another form or another title of a critic. Am I off on that?
No, you're not off on that. I mean, like, they don't consider themselves, a lot of the time, the loud minority, when it comes to comedy at least, they don't really consider themselves critics. They do consider themselves sort of victims to what they had to hear. And I think that's why a lot of times comedians and the loud minority they get into these fights or whatever, or you get the, like, older Bill Burr comedians who are like, oh man, I can't say this anymore, oh you damn kids, or whatever. You know what I mean? It's like, because a lot of the time the loud minority, their complaint isn't necessarily that wasn't funny. It's, why would you put that into my ear? I don't want to hear that. Which is a valid criticism. That is a valid criticism. And I do think that you are a form of you have two different forms of the audience. You're either the audience or you're a critic. You know what I mean? Either you like it or you don't. Whatever.
Is there a difference? Would you see a difference between valid criticism and useful criticism?
Valid criticism and useful criticism. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Like if somebody says what the joke that you told, it didn't sit right with me. You could say his criticism was valid because he has his own background and that joke might have touched on a nerve with that individual. But if the person's joke was meant to offend, is that criticism helpful? Would you say find that criticism being helpful, even though it's not for that specific target audience?
Okay, that's a real interesting question. Actually, I like that. You're pretty good at this podcast and stuff, dude. You should get your own podcast.
I should start a podcast. Yeah.
You really should start a podcast. You should have me on it too.
Yeah.
I think I do think that in order to give useful criticism, you have to go into that mindset already preemptively before you say anything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that you can't just criticize something just to criticize it and consider that helpful criticism. Because a lot of the times, criticism is a form of complaining. And your complaints can still be valid and not be helpful. You know?
Mm-hmm.
So I do believe that a lot of criticism is valid criticism, but not a lot of it is helpful criticism because they're not going into the conversation that way a lot of the time. A lot of the time, especially with audiences, if they think something sucks, they're just going to say it sucks. Or again, they're going to say, why would you put that in my ear? Or, you know, like they're not trying to help a comedian. That's the thing about like comedy that I notice, or whatever. I'm not a professional. I'm like an amateur guy at this comedy stuff, I guess. And I notice that a lot of the times comedy is not, people don't go into comedy trying to be helpful. They just want to be entertained, period. There's no like maybe if you change the joke up a little bit like this way it would be funny this way. It's either it's funny or it's not funny. And then, you know, there's, you know, several different ways to say it's not funny, and there's several different ways of saying it's funny.
Mm-hmm.
But from the audience perspective, no, I think a lot of criticism is more valid criticism than it is helpful criticism.
Okay. We got 10 more minutes, so I feel like we can wrap this up. I'll ask a couple more questions because this one I've been wanting to ask for a while. You might find this one annoying, but you're a Black creator. I'm a Black creator.
Oh my god.
And
no.
You know, the question that you probably get a lot is, how do you feel being a Black creator in America?
Oh man, I love it. I love it because being a Black creator in America is so cool because I like when white people patronize me. I just love it. God, dude, it's like my favorite thing ever.
Mm.
To answer that more seriously, not stop being funny. I think when people ask that question, usually, it's not usually coming from a Black person because I think a Black person knows better than to ask that question. Mm-hmm. And so there's a level of, like, how does it feel to be the little guy? You know, tell me. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not really a question more than it is a way to belittle whoever they're asking that question. I mean, I've seen Black people ask that question, but usually they worked for, like, you know, like the Wall Street Journal or something. Like, they work for companies that are fairly more, you know, white. You know what I mean? and so they're kind of forced to ask certain questions. Um, but I'll try to answer that question as honestly as possible. I don't feel any way about being a black creator.
Right.
I've been online for years. Like I've been online since I was like 11, 12. I've heard every insult in the book, and it's never made me Malcolm X. Like I'm not Malcolm X because someone called me the N word for drawing fan art on Newgrounds. Like you know what I mean? Like I'm not here to change the world, and I don't think every black person has to change the world or whatever. It's good. It would be nice if that was the case, but I don't think so. I do think that being a black creator it should be like being a white creator. Like it should be that way. It's not really because you get asked questions like, "How does it feel to be a black person in America?" or "How does it feel to be a black creator in the comic space?" or whatever. By asking that question, you're automatically putting me, in the minority and automatically making me putting me on the spot, which I think is lame or whatever. But me personally, like I've never felt any different from any white person ever. But that's because I have confidence in my skin color and myself. Now, if it would be different if I wasn't like that, maybe I might tell you something different. Maybe I might tell you something like, "Oh man, it really sucks because I can't get off my stupid ass idea or whatever." Like, you know what I mean? I can't write my comic about the first black superhero, the first black astronaut to touch Mars. I can't tell that story because white people don't want me to tell that story. Oh man, look at me. Oh man. Oh, I can't go on. I can't go on Twitter and upload my own story, and I don't know, maybe support myself. Yeah, that's so crazy.
Right.
I do think there's a lot of I think that I don't want to call it victim mentality, but that pressure to be less comes from white people more than it does come from black people. I don't think there are black creators. I don't think a lot of black creators feel that less of themselves. I don't think they should. I don't think that they. I don't. I think black creators, when they hear that question, should start being more offended than not. That's just me.
Well,
Because you're not lesser. You're a creator. Be a creator. It doesn't matter if you're black or whatever. It doesn't matter if there's a billion white people and it's just you. Make the best thing you can possibly make. And as we've proven with, our art, any black art, hip hop or like rock and roll or whatever, white people will buy, Asian people will buy, Hispanic people will buy, black people will buy, anybody will buy. The free market isn't as racist. You know what I mean? Like numbers can't be racist all the time. They can be sometimes. I mean, if you talk to certain people, those people I was talking about with Clinton and them, whatever. But you talk to them, numbers get a little racist. But a lot of you can get numbers that aren't racist, is what I'm saying.
Like, would you say reality is racist or reality is equal?
I think reality is
like unfair.
I think
I guess a better way to phrase this. That's a weird way to phrase it. It's like is reality? I would say balanced or imbalanced.
I think reality is above being balanced or imbalanced. I think reality is, in my opinion, a reality is way far beyond that. Now, culture-wise, is the culture balanced or imbalanced? No, the culture is imbalanced or whatever. Like I do think that some people get up on certain things through nepotism or hell, even being the same race as some people or same gender or whatever it is. I do think things are imbalanced. or whatever. But I don't think that you should go into industry ready to be the lesser or ready to be the or feel like you're the weak link. I don't think you should hop into the entertainment industry and let these like producers or all these like big wigs or whatever. I don't think you should let them bully you because you're black or put you in that box or kind of force you to live live in that way.
Hmm.
I think that every obstacle you can get over every obstacle, and I don't think that black people are the exception. Black people can get over an obstacle, obviously, or whatever. You look at our history, we've been getting over obstacles all of our fucking lives, dude. It's just been fucking disaster after disaster, and we're still fucking here. So that's my message. If you know what I mean, if you ever if you're like me or whatever, and you get asked that question, just tell them to go fuck themselves. Oh
Hmm.
yeah, go fuck yourself. How about that?
Okay.
Oh man, how does it feel to be a black creator? Kill yourself.
Ah, man. Well, you had to get one of those in an episode. All right.
Oh man, I could ask you to edit that out, but that's too funny.
We're in the home stretch of the podcast. I don't know how many people will get this far.
All right, hold on. For context, by the way, for context for anyone who listens to this, I've been doing that joke for everything me and Mason have ever recorded for about 3 years.
It's so funny
I don't
now.
actually mean kill yourself.
It's so funny now you acknowledge me as you acknowledge me.
We broke character at the end. We fucked up the NPR vibe at the end of it. What?
Oh man. As we start, you're like, oh man, I'm in a comic with some fellow. You should meet him one day. And then at the end, you're like, oh yeah, I used to do that with Mason all the time. You're a Mason, aren't you? Uh,
I'm sorry. I try to stay serious. I
it's
try to be as professional as possible, but I had to get that last part off
it's
because that question does genuinely bother me. And it was, and I knew you'd break character if I said it. Oh, dude.
uh
Oh man. Hey man, listen. This is what it's all about, man.
yeah.
That's why you're sitting
Maybe
down laughing.
Yeah, maybe this can be like a current thing when we reach the last 10-minute mark. That's when the tie goes off, and then
Yeah, just go crazy with it,
yeah,
man.
just go crazy, go stupid. No one's
No,
gonna get to the end.
yeah. Well, like, here's the funny thing though, is that like if I ever do get canceled, like they're gonna look back at this and they're like, why did you tell everybody to kill themselves at the end of it?
It'd be
Oh
like
man.
that. It'd be like that. It'd truly be like that. But
Hey, listen, they canceled so many of my favorite guys, so whatever. Fuck it. If I'm up next, I'm up next.
okay, two more questions and then we're done.
All right.
With the to talk about like black creatives, do you feel that there should be or more representation? Do you think people focus too much on representation? I guess that's my
Yes. Yeah,
next
yes. I do
question.
think people focus on representation a little too much. I do believe representation is important to make the stories different.
Hmm.
That's definitely important. But I think that it goes into what I was saying before, where it's like now it's a little bit more marketable
Hmm.
being a different race or different gender or whatever. So now it's more exploited, where they really champion being representing so many different voices that like things are losing their coherent voices. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like things are becoming really less it's becoming incoherent. That's what I'll say. It's becoming really incoherent. And
Incoherent. Yeah.
with that being said, I think that there is there's a way where you can represent everybody and still keep coherent voices and everybody's happy. At the end of the day, as long as you're making good stuff, that's really all that should matter.
Mm-hmm.
Is that you're making a good thing with this specific voice.
Okay. Last question.
Mm-hmm.
How can people support your goal?
How can people support my goal?
Mm-hmm.
Buy Just a Reaper on Amazon. Look up Just a Reaper on Amazon. Buy it. Give me a lot of money, and the more money you give me, the more stuff I can make, and the more I can waste it on Steam games. So, give me money. Give Mason money.
Money
because I
me?
work with Mason. By supporting him on Amazon or where else do you go? You go you have a PayPal donation button. You sell your comics on your website, masonanonymous.com, correct?
Right, correct.
Yeah, masonanonymous.com. Support Mason because I work with Mason a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He's a hard worker. This guy can't stop working. Anytime we get in a call or something, he's doing something. And this podcast is just one of the many things he's always doing. So I'm very happy you let me on here. I'm very proud of you, brother.
Thank
and
you.
I think you're going to do a lot of great stuff, bro.
I appreciate it. Thank you. This has been the Drawing Solo podcast. My name is Mason McKinney, and I'm with
Matt for now.
And if you want to find out how to get inspiration from anywhere, make sure you sign up to my newsletter and get a free ebook, and that'll show you to do so. My free gift to you. Description below. Signing out.